Hi guys, Harry here, and today's video is going to be a very special one, and that is because in this video I'm not going to be talking about one show, I'm not going to be talking about two shows, I'm not even going to be talking about three shows, but that's right, I am going to be talking about 4 shows. In this video I am discussing spin-offs. And are they a good idea? Are they not? Did we succeed in spin-offs last time we had them, or should they just be left behind? But before we get into the video, don't forget to subscribe, also leave a like and comment down below, and let's get into the video. So, the reason why I'm talking about spin-offs is because Russell T Davies said in interviews, and of course other things he's been quoted in, that he's bringing back spin-offs like Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures. He said those specifically because those were the 2 spin-offs in his era where he had a big handle over them. And I will be going over all the spin-offs we've had in Doctor Who. I will be going over, of course, Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures, but I will also be going over Class and Doctor Who Redacted as well. However, I will not be going over K9 and Company, as that had only 1 episode before it was cancelled, and also I will not be going over the TV series K9, as it wasn't produced by the BBC, and therefore it couldn't really reference Doctor Who, and it couldn't have any actors from the main Doctor Who show without being kind of sued by the BBC. So that is the reason why I will not be talking about K9, the TV series. I will not be talking about those 2 K9 spin-offs, because they're kind of failed Doctor Who spin-offs, and one isn't even produced by Doctor Who. So now getting into the spin-offs that we will talk about in this video, let's start off with Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures. Of course, Russell T Davies cited these as the spin-offs he's going to try and create in his new era. They're going to be like Torchwood and Sarah Jane Adventures, of course, from his first era. And I think the reason why Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures work so well is their main characters. Of course, the main character of Torchwood is Captain Jack Harkness, who appeared in Doctor Who before with the 9th Doctor and then came in later into the 10th Doctor, but he got his spin-off after his time with the 9th Doctor. And the Sarah Jane Adventures focus around, of course, Sarah Jane Smith. Of course, from Doctor Who, she was a companion of the 3rd and 4th Doctor, and then later returned as kind of an intro for the Sarah Jane Adventures when she met up with the 10th Doctor. And, of course, then she got a spin-off after she had met up with the 10th Doctor in School Reunion. And both of these characters, Captain Jack Harkness and Sarah Jane Smith respectively, were fan favourite characters from Doctor Who. They were characters that people just loved, so it made sense as why they would be main characters and get their own spin-offs. And then I think another genius step in making Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures were that Captain Jack and Sarah Jane Smith were not the audience surrogates. We got new characters as audience surrogates in the form of Gwen Cooper in Torchwood and Luke, Maria, Clyde, Rani, and eventually Sky as well in the Sarah Jane Adventures. They were the eyes of the audience. They were the ones that we related to most, even though, of course, Captain Jack Harkness and Sarah Jane Smith were fan favourite characters that the audience loved, but it made them kind of a more Doctor-like figure without being as overpowered as the Doctor sometimes is. However, it presented a good balance between them being the humans of the companions of the Doctor, the character we all know and love, yet also being kind of shown to their team as the Doctor figure, so of course being respected by their team as well, and I think they struck an excellent balance. And also, I do just want to say, Gwen Cooper and Luke, Maria, Clyde, Rani and Sky are like the companions in the main show. They're amazing. I did do a video on why I think Ruby Sunday will be the best companion, and it kind of factored into Sarah Jane's companions. We'll link that video above. But yeah, I think they act like the main companions in the show, if not better than some of them. So, with a fan favourite character that was kind of Doctor-like and companions surrounding them, their structure in the spin-off was similar to the structure of Doctor Who. However, these shows were also tied into and referenced Doctor Who, but they didn't rely on it. Torchwood only briefly touched on Doctor Who, and I will go over what characters and things they included from Doctor Who. So Torchwood included Martha Jones. She was probably the big thing from Doctor Who. Of course, Martha Jones was the companion of the 10th Doctor in Series 3. However, in Torchwood, she only appeared in 3 episodes, lightly tying in the events of Utopia, The Sound of Drums, and Last of the Time Lords, which it was only kind of linked between with Captain Jack Harkness, as none of the other characters knew who Martha Jones was. However, that was a big thing for Torchwood and Doctor Who, tying in close together. And also there were aliens, Cybermen, well, a Cyberwoman from Doctor Who, and that was the only alien from Doctor Who that was in Torchwood, and Martha Jones was the only companion from Doctor Who that showed up. And there was no sign of the Doctor at all. He didn't appear in Torchwood, and we only heard the sounds of the TARDIS. We didn't see the TARDIS, but we only heard the sounds of the TARDIS once in Torchwood, which means that, yes, they definitely tied into Doctor Who. There was no going over that. There was no thinking, well, this isn't anything like Doctor Who, but it differentiated itself enough where it could not be at all compared like it was a carbon copy. And the Sarah Jane Adventures followed a similar format to Torchwood. So the Sarah Jane Adventures included old Doctor Who cast members of the Brigadier. He only appeared in 2 episodes. And also Jo Grand, she a past companion of the 3rd Doctor, who Sarah Jane joined not long after. And also, it did include the Doctor, the 10th and the 11th Doctor. However, both of them only appeared for a single episode. And, I mean, it's not really saying that there's a lot of Doctor Who in it. And that continued with aliens. The Slovene, well, okay, that kind of appeared quite a bit, but that was kind of the main enemy of the Sarah Jane Adventures team, the Slovene. There were Sontarans too, but they only appeared in 2, 4 episodes. There was also Jadoon as well from Doctor Who, and they only appeared in 2 episodes. So again, this was a lot like Torchwood. It tied into Doctor Who, but no way it could be said it was a carbon copy of Doctor Who. I mean, there was only 2 companions in the Sarah Jane Adventures that were in Doctor Who, 3 different alien species, and then the Doctor, the 10th and 11th Doctor respectively, only showed up for 1 episode each in the Sarah Jane Adventures. So yes, it tied into Doctor Who, but also it was enough to differentiate itself and stand on its own merit, a lot like Torchwood. And since we're talking about returning things from Doctor Who, of course we have to talk about the main cast member from Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures. Let's start off with Torchwood and go to Captain Jack Harkness. Of course, Captain Jack Harkness first appeared in Doctor Who from The Empty Child to The Parting of the Ways. So that is 5 episodes. He first showed up on the 21st of May 2005 in The Empty Child, and then was last seen consistently in the 18th of June 2005 in The Parting of the Ways. And then Torchwood followed soon after with its first episode, which aired the 22nd of October 2006. And I think that gave a good time for us to not be hit over the head with Captain Jack Harkness stuff, but also having him still at the forefront of people's minds, while, of course, having him at popularity to head a spin-off. And the same thing happens with Sarah Jane Smith. Of course, she appeared in Doctor Who as the 3rd and 4th Doctor's companions. However, recently, more tied to the spin-off, she appeared in School Reunion back in the 29th of April 2006. And then the Sarah Jane Adventures followed after with its first episode, which aired the 1st of January 2007. Again, It's not like you're being hit over the head with Sarah Jane Smith stuff, but she is still at the forefront of people's minds, so she is at enough popularity so she can head a spin-off exactly like Captain Jack Harkness before her. And on the subject of main characters, we now have to move on past the Russell T Davies 1 era, and we move into Class, and this is why I think Class didn't work as a Doctor Who spin-off, because none of the main characters were from Doctor Who. The kind of main character from Doctor Who was Coal Hill School. In Class it is Coal Hill Academy, and that was the only character carried over from Doctor Who. So Coal Hill School was in the first ever episode of Doctor Who on the 23rd of November 1963, of course the first episode of Doctor Who ever, and then it returned in the 50th anniversary, the Day of the Doctor, of course the 23rd of November 2013. And then it reappeared again in The Magician's Apprentice on the 19th of September 2015, and Clara Oswald was a teacher there, and of course she was mentioned in Class. And the reason why Coal Hill School was introduced in those stories was because Clara Oswald had become a teacher there, and it was mentioned throughout her time she was a teacher at Coal Hill School. However, the actual school didn't show up at all after the episode The Magician's Apprentice. However, like I said with Captain Jack Harkness and Sarah Jane Smith, we don't want to be beat over the head with the main character of that new show. So Class had its first episode, which aired the 22nd of October 2016, which is roughly the same amount of gap as with Captain Jack Harkness and Torchwood, as Sarah Jane Smith and the Sarah Jane Adventures as well. So I think that's a good gap. However, the bad thing is it didn't have a main character from Doctor Who. Again, the school was the main character from Doctor Who. So it didn't have anything to anchor itself to Doctor Who, as no main character came from Doctor Who. If Clara Oswald was the main character in Class, the show could have worked in a similar way to Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures. Yes, I know Clara is not as beloved as most fans as Captain Jack Harkness and Sarah Jane Smith, but she is still beloved as some, and I also really like Clara Oswald as a companion, so I would have definitely been down for her to be the main character of Class. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. She was killed in Doctor Who, and Class decided to present itself as this new spin-off without a main character from Doctor Who. However, Class then fell into a trap. Without a main character from Doctor Who, it had to tie into Doctor Who much more than Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures. Class actually relied on a cameo from the 12th Doctor in the first episode, so it would get people to tune in. Again, with a main character, Clara Oswald, Class could have worked in the same way as Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures, by tying into and referencing Doctor Who, but more subtly. However, Class couldn't do that really without a main character, and therefore it kind of just faltered. And without a main character from Doctor Who, and with trying not to make itself a carbon copy of Doctor Who, Class and Doctor Who felt like completely different shows, except with the 12th Doctor and Weeping Angels just randomly showing up. And of course, the fact that it was set in Coal Hill School, which was first introduced in Doctor Who. But again, without the main character, it just felt weird. It just felt the 12th Doctor and the Weeping Angels were just showing up randomly in Class. And now let's move on to Doctor Who Redacted, which didn't have any main characters that came from Doctor Who, just like Class. However, I think it dealt with this a lot better than Class. Doctor Who Redacted had a rotating cast that came from Doctor Who, having different Doctor Who characters helping out the main characters, Abby, Shauna and Cleo, in Doctor Who Redacted. And I think it was to help with the fact that Doctor Who Redacted was a podcast, and that to kind of tie into Doctor Who, there needed to be lots of Doctor Who references in Doctor Who Redacted. And in my opinion, Doctor Who Redacted does Doctor Who continuity better than Doctor Who itself, especially after The Timeless Child. It was just amazing. And to talk about these rotating cast members, Doctor Who Redacted had Doctor Who cast members of the 13th Doctor and then later the 10th Doctor, also Rani Chandra from the Sarah Jane Adventures as well, Penny Carter from Partners in Crime, Dr. Oliver Morgenstein from Smith and Jones, Larry Nightingale from Blink, Kate Stewart, of course, the head of unit from multiple episodes, Petronella Osgood, of course, kind of Kate Stewart's second in command from multiple episodes. And finally, Madame Vastra, of course, from multiple episodes, the leader of the Paternoster gang. And just amazing. And I think with this rotating cast member, it kind of made it so that Doctor Who Redacted did have a main cast member from the Doctor Who show, without really having a main cast member from the Doctor Who show, if that makes any sense. If you haven't seen Doctor Who Redacted, I say you really need to watch it. I did a whole breakdown on all of the Doctor Who Redacted episodes, which I will link up in the cards up above. I really hope you go and watch those breakdowns and listen to Doctor Who Redacted as well, because that articulates my point a lot more than what I've just said. So, I've gone over how the spin-offs work in their base form, with having a kind of main character that heads it up, or in Class's case, not having a main character that heads it up, and can tie it in, therefore, to Doctor Who, or has someone that we look to, as, of course, we've grown to know them in Doctor Who, and, of course, they become a Doctor-like figure. So that works for Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures, and also a bit for Doctor Who Redacted as well. But now I'm going to go over the channels that these spin-offs were broadcasted on, and how that worked out for them. So, of course, let's start with Torchwood again. So Torchwood was on BBC Three for its first series, and then was later moved to BBC Two for Series 2, of course, with its success from Series 1. And with the success of Series 2, it was later moved to BBC 1 for Series 3 and Series 4, and then in conjunction with Series 4, Stars, an American premium cable network, also had Series 4 running on their channel as well. And of course, Torchwood was made for the young adult viewers. And I think this kind of worked well for itself. It was kind of put on the third BBC channel, kind of the one for like startups. This is where stuff started up. Of course, Torchwood, that is where this came from. And also shows like, you might remember Gavin and Stacey. Those all started on BBC Three. And then with the success, they moved later on to BBC One. And Torchwood, exactly the same, made for the young adult viewers. And I think this kind of helped them. It gave them a slot that they might not have had for Torchwood, being they started with Series 1. They might not have had space for it in BBC 2 or BBC 1, as it was just a start-up and they didn't know whether it was going to work or not. However, there was love and passion brought into this project, and, it proved its worth, being able to finally be broadcast on BBC One and as its main channel. And of course, for the release of Torchwood, there was a press release and there was a website for Torchwood, as well as trailers promoting Torchwood, getting people to realise that Torchwood was on and hopefully watch it, which of course people definitely did. And a similar thing happens with the Sarah Jane Adventures. Its main channel was on CBBC, as it was for children, CBBC being the children's channel of the BBC. And of course, there was a press release for the Sarah Jane Adventures. There was a website for the Sarah Jane Adventures, along with, of course, trailers advertising it as well. And I think this worked really well for the Sarah Jane Adventures. As a children's show, I don't think it could have worked on any other of the BBC shows other than CBBC. And it worked really well there. It gave it a slot, and it became really popular for children on CBBC and became one of the best shows, of course, on that channel. However, now we move on to Class, and this is where things get a bit weird, and this isn't Class's fault. So Class was originally aired on the BBC Three channel, and it was later released on BBC One. And of course it had adverts and billboards and trailers advertising it. However, it was released on BBC Three, and as I said, in 2016. And between the 16th of February 2016 and the 1st of February 2022, between those 2 dates, BBC Three was only online. So unless you actively searched online for Class, you were not going to find it. Yes, there were adverts on the main channel, there were billboards, trailers on YouTube, and, well, billboards, as I said, advertising Class. However, you weren't just going to come across Class, you had to actively look on it, and this hindered Class in a massive way. Basically, it being only Doctor Who fans that watched Class, as BBC Three was online, and only those people that had a laptop, internet connection, all of those things, just to watch a Doctor Who spin-off, and that completely, well, hindered Class. And following a similar pattern to Class, we move on to Doctor Who Redacted. So Doctor Who Redacted was released on BBC Sounds right after the Easter special Legend of the Sea Devils, and there was an article written on it. Yeah, that's all. That is the only publication this had. I didn't even know there was a spin-off podcast called Doctor Who Redacted until I saw a YouTube video. And for someone that does Doctor Who as, I do Doctor Who YouTube videos, that is not a good thing. That I had to watch someone else's YouTube video to know there was a Doctor Who podcast spin-off. So, Doctor Who Redacted is worse than Class in the terms of what channel it was on and how it was advertised, because there was hardly any advertising, and also it was on BBC Sounds, a podcast, something completely new for Doctor Who, and it was kind of overshadowed by Legend of the Sea Devils, releasing right after it. It's just bad marketing, which I did a video on. The Chibnall era had bad marketing. I will link that up in the cards below, above, and that completely hindered Doctor Who Redacted. However, with me talking about those channels and how well I think they did on those channels, of course, the real reason to find out if they did well on those channels is, of course, viewing figures. So let's again start with Torchwood. So Series 1 had an average viewer rating of 1.4 million views. Okay, not too bad, not great, but it's only its first series. So, Torchwood Series 2 had an average viewer rating of 3.8 million views. That is more than double what they got. That is amazing. They took that, ran with it. People loved Series 1, and people, well, they made sure to tune in for Series 2, and it worked. And again, Torchwood Children of Earth, so Series 3, had an average viewer rating of 6.47 million views. Again, almost doubling it. And that is amazing. That is some of the best views. That is beating Doctor Who episodes in the Chibnall era. And I think beating some Capaldi episodes as well for views. And that is amazing. And again, this is just an average viewer rating. So there were less views than that, but there were also more views than that as well. And Torchwood Miracle Day, so Series 4, had an average viewer rating of 5.2 million views. Yes, it went down a bit, but in my opinion, Miracle Day is a lot worse than Children of Earth. But again, it showed that people absolutely loved Torchwood and wanted more of it. So I think Torchwood did amazing with its viewer ratings. So let's move on to the Sarah Jane Adventures. So the Sarah Jane Adventures actually started with a one-off special, which had 2.9 million views. 2.92 million views is more than Torchwood Series 1 had as an average viewer count. So that just shows how good it was already. And of course, Series 1 of the Sarah Jane Adventures had an average viewer rating of 1.6 million views. That is amazing. 1.6 million views, more than Torchwood Series 1. I think it is just amazing. Of course, Series 2 did pretty good as well. An average viewer rating of 1.3 million views, a bit under Torchwood Series 1, but it's still amazing for a spin-off, especially on a kids show. And also, Series 3 had an average viewer rating of 1 million views, again a bit less, but still pretty good. Series 4 had an average viewer rating of 0.8 million views, so not great, but again, it's not moving into it being a failure or a flop territory. And Series 5 had an average viewer rating of only 0.6 million views. Not great, but again, Series 5 was not completed when it was broadcast, so I can overlook the failures of Series 5. And now we move into Class. Now, for Class, I couldn't find all the episodes, and on some sites I did, but the numbers seem to conflict with other sites. However, I think the highest rating for a Class episode was 0.94 million views, and I think the lowest was 0.2 million views, which is a lot lower than Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures, but those numbers might not be 100% right. Around those, Class has an average viewer rating of 0.5 million views, lower than the Sarah Jane Adventures and Torchwood. But I'm not sure if they're 100% right, but 0.5 million views average viewer rating is around that. And for Doctor Who Redacted, I couldn't find any viewer ratings, maybe because it's a podcast, but I don't know, it's kind of hard to say if Doctor Who Redacted was a success or a failure based on viewer ratings, as I couldn't find any. And now we move into the endgame. So why were these spin-offs cancelled? So let's start off with Torchwood. So technically Torchwood wasn't cancelled. It went into indefinite hiatus after Russell T Davies heard tragic news that his husband, Andrew Smith, had been diagnosed with brain cancer in 2018, and he sadly passed away that year. Of course, tragedy struck Russell T Davies. Stars actually said they would love for Torchwood to have carried on into Series 5. But of course, with this tragedy of the person who kind of created this spin-off not being able to work on it, and then of course, after grieving and getting over his loss, moving on to other things, I can see why Torchwood was never picked up again. The Sarah Jane Adventures was also cancelled in a similarly tragic way to Torchwood. So the Sarah Jane Adventures was brought to an end after Elizabeth Sladen's sudden death from cancer, and the BBC confirmed that the show would not return for a sixth series, and as I said before, there wasn't even enough footage for a full series of Series 5. And that is, it's tragic, and really the only reasons why Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures hadn't carried on for more series or aren't still alive today is because tragedy struck people surrounding the project. Of course, the main character of the Sarah Jane Adventures, and of course, kind of the showrunner, his husband, tragedy struck him for Torchwood as well. So that's why neither of those spin-offs, that's why they were both cancelled, or why we haven't had any more series of them. However, this is not the reason for Class. Class was cancelled as not many people could find it online, as BBC Three was only online. I know I'm beating that over the head, but if that happened with Torchwood, Torchwood might not have been in the same success that it was if BBC Three was online when Torchwood was on BBC Three. And even when Class was moved to be on BBC One, as I know some of you will have pointed out that I said it was on BBC One, repeated, it was given the Monday night slot, which is known as the graveyard slot. And even though there was some advertisement for Class, there wasn't as much as Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures. So with the part that, one, it was only online, and when it was repeated, it was given the graveyard slot, that's the reason why Class was cancelled. And now we move on to Doctor Who Redacted. That hasn't been brought back for a second series, maybe because it was only on BBC Sounds, and it wasn't advertised at all, really. And I hate to say this, but Cleo, the main character, is basically the writer Juno Dawson. They're both trans, they both follow their own way, they don't really care what others think about them, and they're both heavily involved in Doctor Who. Juno Dawson was the writer of Doctor Who Redacted, and, well, as I said that way, you're basically writing yourself as the main character in Doctor Who. Now, I probably would do the same myself if I was a writer of Doctor Who, so I don't want to judge you too harshly. However, the cast was all female. That was the selling point of it. An all-female cast, not taking men as the big characters. However, the two most important characters behind Cleo, Abby and Shauna are Cleo's dad and also the 10th Doctor. Cleo's dad was the reason Cleo why Cleo wasn't redacted, and the 10th Doctor was the Doctor that saved Cleo's life, but was too late to save her dad's life. But the two most important characters are male, when the biggest selling point was this was an all-female led spin-off. And the two most important characters are males. That completely destroyed the fact that females would want to watch this, the fact that men wouldn't watch this because it was an all-female cast, and then suddenly Cleo's dad and the 10th Doctor are the most important, but they wouldn't know about that because, well, they were only revealed in the last episode. The only people that would watch it were Doctor Who fans like me, and of course all of you watching this video. But that was a real reason why I think Doctor Who Redacted has failed. And yes, it could be too soon for it could be talking about this. It might be ready, it might have been picked up for a second series, but I really doubt it. And this is the main reason, because it was on BBC Sounds. Juno Dawson, Cleo, same character, and all-female led cast, the two most important characters were males. However, on this channel, you know I am all about positivity, so I wanted to end on a positive note. So of course, Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures are regarded as excellent spin-offs, great spin-offs, and lots of fans wish they could have continued. Of course, the channels that these spin-offs were on, they wish they could have continued if it wasn't for the tragic circumstances. However, I don't think Class is as well regarded as Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures. However, I still think that the episodes Detained and the Metaphysical Engine, or what Quill did, are great episodes. They are amazing, and the way that they balance and tie into each other, I think are amazing. If all the episodes were like this in Class, I think Class might have been picked up for a second series. And also, whilst I was trying to find the viewer ratings for Class, I came across a website, you might have heard of it, Rotten Tomatoes, and of course that reviews movies and everything, and Class has a certified fresh rating. Now, if that doesn't tell you that Class was at least somewhat good, I don't know what tells you that, well, I don't know what to tell you if you can't think that Class did have some shining moments. And I think Doctor Who Redacted is a great spin-off. The advertising for it should have been a lot better, and the fact that it should have been on BBC Sounds and pointing out whether they wanted females to be the most important characters or not. But moving that aside, I think it was great. It has better continuity on Doctor Who than Doctor Who itself. That should tell you how amazing and all the dedicated research these writers did for Doctor Who Redacted. And I think it is great, it is amazing, And the way that it has cliffhangers of every episode, it makes you keep guessing. It makes you want to watch it. Makes you want to listen to it. And I would just say, I think if it had better advertising, it wasn't just on BBC Sounds and they sorted out who they wanted as the main character, I think it would be as widely regarded as Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures. But that is just my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments below. Of course, if you liked all these spin-offs, if you didn't like some of them, let me know what you liked about them, what you didn't like about them. And of course, if you liked this video, don't forget to leave a like, also subscribe, and share it out. And I will see you in the next one.